All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You back in Alligator Pit. Just want to give a major salute and shout out to you. Much appreciation and much love. Let's go on this journey. So as you can see in front of us, we got our dry erase whiteboard. I got my marker. I got some notes that we're going to refer to. And we should have us a very, very enlightening and intelligent video. And hopefully you learn much and you gain much from this, all right? So the objective and point and purpose of this video ultimately is just to learn what is money, all right? So the point of this video is to learn what is money, okay? And we'll also look into some of the ancient practices of, using gold or financial instruments and how that played into the creation of money. And we'll talk a little bit about even the ethnic national group of people that were in, at least in the Western Hemisphere, that created the monetary system and the banking system that we are still using today. All right. And we'll look into a variety of other things. And hopefully by the end of it, you should get some greater understanding of this financial instrument or this tool that we're all using, because we all know that money is very, very, important to our everyday lives. Um, and it's very hard for us to acquire. Like, we have to put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. We have to put in a lot of real energy, a lot of real effort, right? Most people that may have a job or some type of employment, or maybe you're self-employed, but you wake up early, you feel your body tired when you go to bed because you're doing real work to get this money. But what if I told you that the people that are creating and printing the money are not putting in that same kind of work that we may put in to obtain the money? What if I told you that the people that created the money are alchemists, and like they turn lead to gold, they turn worthless sheets of paper into powerful instruments that a lot of people are out here going crazy over. And unfortunately, many have lost their lives over. All right. So, as I said, by the end of this video, we should have a greater understanding of what is money. And you can use this however you see fit. All right. So, the first thing I want you to do is bring your attention to this side of the board where you see me pointing right here with my, my little white stick, the bottom right hand side of the board. And as I was preparing for this video, I thought about something. When I was a young teenager, growing up, whether we would go to the gas station or the candy lady, sometimes we would have, $5, $10, and maybe a couple of dollars. And we would go and get, let's say, some chips, Lay's chips, hot chips, whatever it was, hot fries. That was one of our favorites. And I can remember being a young man, you would have, the 99 cent or $1 for 3 bags of chips. So how many of you all remember when you can go to the candy lady or the gas station years ago, where it only took $1.07 or 99 cents? It came up to $1.07 when it came to Georgia state tax, but it was being promoted as 99 cents for 3 bags of chips, right? Sounds like a very good deal. I can remember them all. It would be these small bags of chips. You know what I'm saying? 99 cents for 3 of them. That's a pretty good deal, right? So let's say that was in the year 2000. But here we are 2+ decades later in 2025. But in order to get 1 bag of chips, it costs $1.29. So here we are 2 decades plus later, and the value of the money seems to decrease. All right. We used to be able to get 3 bags of chips for 99 cents, but now today we can only get 1 bag of chips for $1.29. Okay. So as we can clearly see in this example, that as time goes on, that the value of the money decreases. So that's the first thing I want you to keep in mind, that when time goes on, United States dollar or the United States dollar or financial currency, the value of it decreases. Okay. Now I have, aged a little bit as a human being. Okay. I'm not the same age I was in the year 2000, but not much has changed. So why is it that just a little while ago I could get 3 bags of chips for my dollar, but today my dollar doesn't have the same purchasing power? It doesn't have the same buying power. The value of it has decreased. Why is that? All right. One of the terms that we hear thrown a lot in economics, especially now in 2025 with some of the financial hardships going around the country and the world for that matter, you hear this term called inflation. All right. You hear the term inflation. Now, you have various definitions for it, but we're going to keep it real basic and simple here. Inflation is basically when the value of the money decreases because too much money has been printed. All right. Keep in mind that, when something is readily accessible or is easily available, the value of it won't be as high. But when something is not as available, it's not easy to find, then that makes the value of it very, very high. All right. Another example, like think about when the Air Jordan sneakers used to come out. They would come out on Saturdays, right? And let's say it would be a pair of Air Jordans that didn't come out for a long time. Like let's say it's been 5, 10 years and they just not being re-released. When those shoes would come out, you would see a lot of craziness, people fighting and all this, madness going on because them shoes had a high value. They hadn't been out in a long time. But let's say if it's a pair of Jordans where they, came out last year and they're coming out again this year, the human psyche is not going to react the same to it because the value assessment isn't going to be the same. It's like these shoes are available and like they're readily accessible. All I got to do is either go to this store or go to that store and I can get them. So you're not going to have people fighting over them like that. So understand that based on the inventory of how many shoes they have available and how many they don't have available, they can almost control the behavior of the consumer, or they can control the behavior of the buyer when it comes to the shoes. Well, the same way that works with Air Jordans is the same way it works for money. So the more money that they print, the more money that's in circulation, the easier it is to have availability and accessibility to it. Then you're going to have more wealth spread around. You're going to have people on average with, more monetary purchasing abilities. Okay. But if the people that print the money don't want everybody to have that same access to freedom financially, then what they'll do is they'll destroy money that's already in circulation, and they'll cause other types of artificial events to basically destroy the wealth of the people. So keep in mind that money is a created artificial construct, and people are actually printing it. All right. There is nothing spiritual about money. All right. There's nothing religious about money. Because money is very, very emotional to us and it has the ability to solve our problems, that makes us want to attribute divinity to it. So we think that, putting prayers on the altar for money and stuff like that, is something that we'll say the spiritual world may even care about. But at the end of the day, it doesn't. You know what I'm saying? Money is a very, very material object. All right. It's a very, very material object. So that's what I want you to keep in mind, that remember in 2000, we could get 3 bags of chips for 99 cents, but today we can only get 1 bag of chip for $1.29. So that means as time has went on, the value of our dollar has decreased. The reason that the value of the dollar has decreased, one of the reasons is inflation, because so much money has been printed that the money that already exists in the market, the value of it isn't as high. All right. So in order to buy something, you have to pay more. And you're not going to receive the same value. That's why I'm paying more for 1 bag of chips. But in the past, I paid less and I got 3 bags of chips. You know what I'm saying? And in a minute, we'll go into what a gold run problem is. All right. So as I said, we want to talk a little bit about the history of the monetary system, banking, and the practice of business and merchants. And for this one, we want to go back, about we can go over 2,000, 3,000 years. You know what I'm saying? Let's say we're going back to the 900s before Common Era, or 1,000 before Common Era, or so-called 1,000 BC. That's the time period that I want to go back to right now. And we want to read about the people known as the Phoenician merchants. All right. So we're going to get some background history right now on the Phoenician merchants. Now, as I've stated in previous videos, when you look up history, when you see that term Phoenician, I want you to think about 2 people or 2 different ethnic national groups. When you see that term Phoenician, I want you to think about the Shemitic or Semitic Israelites, and I want you to think about the Canaanite Sidonians or the Canaanite Tyrians. Okay. So although you may see that term Phoenician, but it dates back to the alliance between King Solomon and King Hiram of Tyre. All right. This would have been around the 900s, 1000 before Common Era of BC. But in the book of Kings in the Old Testament, in the Torah or the Bible, you will read about the relationship and the alliance between King Hiram of Tyre, which was a Canaanite nation, and King Solomon of the Israelites, which was a Shemitic nation. And they had a lot of business dealings, and they even constructed the Temple of Jerusalem together. Okay. Also, too, this is some of the background relationship between Freemasonry, because in the literature, in the mythology of Freemasonry, they have the story of Hiram Abiff and him working with King Solomon to construct the temple. So the Freemasons actually got that from the Old Testament. So I'm talking about that same history. Now, it's very, very important because a lot of the nobility and the aristocrats that would end up rising in Western civilization throughout the last 2,000 years have done their best to emulate or mock the Phoenician business practices of Solomon and Hiram. All right. So when you think about the banking system of Venice or these different Venetian bankers, this is the people I'm talking about. Also, this when you think about Venice, Italy, all right, Venice, Italy, Venice, Italy. When you think about Phoenix, Arizona, all right, this is that same word going back to the Phoenicians, all right. So the word Venice, Italy, or Phoenix, Arizona, Phoenix, Phoenician, Venice, Venetian, Phoenician. This is all talking about the same people, okay? All right, talking about the same people. So the ancient Romans, the ancient Etruscans, a lot of that culture goes back to the Phoenicians, which were a melanated people of the Mediterranean, the Levant, certain parts of Europa, and eventually they made their way into the Americas. All right. So I'm going to read just some, some overview information on Phoenician merchants. Phoenician merchants were skilled seafarers from ancient Phoenicia, modern day Lebanon, who created a vast trade network across the Mediterranean from approximately 1500 to 300 BCE. They exported luxury goods like Tyrian purple textiles, cedar wood, and metalwork, and imported raw materials such as ivory and silver. They established trading posts and colonies, most notably Carthage, to facilitate their extensive commerce. All right. So we're talking about these Phoenician merchants, these skilled seafarers who were Israelites and Canaanites working together under the leadership of King Solomon and King Hiram. But the Phoenician or Canaanite people, they actually had been doing this even before the Israelites were established. So the Israelite people learned a lot of their merchant and business practices from the Canaanite Sidonians, from the Canaanite Tyrians. Okay, so the Phoenicians are a very, very instrumental nation of people when it comes to Western civilization and a lot of the cultural practices that we still have today. And as you can see, it goes back a very, very long time, 1500 BC. So that means that's 1,500 years before the birth of so-called Jesus Christ, if you want to put it in that type of context. Seafaring masters. The Phoenicians were renowned for their advanced ships and navigation skills, which allowed them to sail far across the Mediterranean and also into the Americas. Extensive network. They built a powerful network of colonies and trading posts in places like Spain, North Africa, Sicily, and Sardinia. So that's why when I talk about the Phoenician practices being, distributed throughout Europe, it's because a lot of their trading cities that they had established. Skilled artisans. They manufactured and traded a wide range of goods, including fine textiles, glassware, intricate metalwork, and wood carvings. Now, this is very important. I want you to listen to this because if they're trading and doing all this business, on this in seafaring, they meeting a lot of people from different groups. They speak in different languages, so they got to create a common way to do business. All right, listen up. Commercial innovation. Phoenician merchants used bartering and later developed complex systems with trade agreements, written contracts, and standardized coins for efficient trade. Now, I'm going to reread that because that's basically the crux of a lot of what the video is about. Phoenician merchants used bartering and later developed complex systems with trade agreements, written contracts, and standardized coins for efficient trading. So, what this information is giving you is that the Phoenicians laid down the template for what we know of as the modern day banking system because they were responsible for creating these contracts, trade agreements, the bartering system, all right, and standardized coins that they could use for efficient trading. Remember, if you're coming from different nations and different cultures, you all may have your own financial instrument. And how do you know that the nation you want to do business with will accept your financial instrument? So there has to be a common financial instrument that we all use, that we all will agree to take to do business. And as we know that primary financial instrument was gold. So that's why you see right here on our first bulletin point, I have gold financial instrument because in the ancient world, whenever you wanted to do business, you either did direct trading or you use gold as an intermediate for what it is you wanted. All right. So let's say, for example, that let's say it's a I've given this example before. Let's say it's a fox fur coat that I want to get my wife. Okay. It's a fox fur coat I want to get my wife. The wintertime is coming up. It's going to be cold, right? And let's say I come across this Creek Indian trader. All right. Now he has the fox fur coat. And let's say that for the fox fur coat, he may want a caravan full of tobacco, cotton, and fruit, let's say. All right. So when I have that caravan of tobacco, cotton, and fruit, I will trade him directly for the fox fur coat. So he has his caravan of items. I have the coat and I can give it to my wife. So we both got what we wanted, right? But let's say there's a situation where I don't have the caravan of tobacco and fruit, but I still want the fox fur coat. What I could do is I could give him gold chips or give him gold and the agreed upon amount that will equal the value of the fox fur coat. So whether I'm trading gold or whether I'm trading a caravan of items, it's all about matching up value for value. All right. So whatever he assesses the value of the fox fur coat to be, it needs to equal the value of the caravan, or it needs to equal the value or the weight of the gold that we're going to use to trade so we can make that transaction. So in the ancient world, that's pretty much how business was done. You either did a direct trade for the item you wanted, or if there was an intermediate item needed, so we could have a standardized way of trading, it would have been gold. That would have been that primary financial instrument. All right. So you already know about the Phoenicians and how they also created the alphabet, which is part of the language as well. So remember, they had to have a financial instrument that was a standardized way of doing business, and they also had to have a language that was standardized so they could all communicate with each other. So a lot of the Phoenician language, which is also Canaanite Hebraic language, was used so they could do standard, so they could communicate. That was like a standard language. Excuse me. So today, for example, what we know of as American English is actually the standard trading language of the world. All right. So the Phoenicians, they helped establish, creating languages that, people that were trading could speak so they could all, be in communication with each other. Okay. So let's go to our bullet point dealing with the Phoenicians. As I said, they use gold as a financial instrument. Now, the creation of the promissory note, because now we're going to get ready to go, a little deeper into what is money. So this is what will happen. All right. We'll kind of talk about all of these at once. The creation of the promissory note, the banks and the gold storehouses, the IOUs, the promises to pay. So what will happen is this. You got to remember, in the ancient world, they didn't have, the Tesla, they didn't have the G-Wagon, or they didn't have modern day cars to transport and to travel. They had to go by horse and carriage, or they had to walk. So traveling was a very, very, tiresome thing. They had a lot of items to bring with them. So imagine if you're traveling and you got to go a long distance, but you don't want to leave your gold or you don't want to leave your wealth. You want it to go with you, right? So could you imagine traveling with these very, very, very heavy bags of gold? That could be very dangerous to do that. You could be traveling and you could lose your gold. It could be a bad weather storm or something like that. So, your items get, mixed up, or even it could be raiders and robbers that could find you along your traveling path, and you can get robbed and they could take all your gold. So people that had wealth during the ancient world, they had a problem when it came to their gold and their wealth, and they wanted to feel secure. They needed to feel some type of security from that. So what started to happen was some of these Phoenician merchants, as they started to gain more wealth doing business themselves, they started to figure, hey, well, we'll create these things called storehouses where you could take all of your gold, which is what your wealth was, and this could be a safe, centralized place that you could put it, and it's going to be secure. And a lot of people started to do that. And what they would do is they would place their gold or deposit their gold in the gold storehouse of the Phoenician merchant or the Phoenician banker. And what the Phoenician banker would do is give them a document, all right, called a promise to pay or a promissory note. And it would equal the same value as the gold that was just deposited. So this promise to pay or this promissory note, this document, it will serve as an asset for the gold depositor. So now they could use this promise to pay document to do business and trade as they were on their travels, and they didn't need all that gold. They didn't have to travel with all that gold all of a sudden. All right. So let's say, for example, they had, X amount of gold, but then now they have a promissory note that was given to them by the bank, and they can now use that promissory note to travel and do business with. All right. And whomever that they're doing business with, when they were ready to redeem the gold, they're supposed to take that same promissory note back to the Phoenician banker and be able to get that gold out of the bank that that person originally had deposited into that bank. All right. I hope that makes sense. All right. So this is what was happening. Like, people wanted to safeguard their gold and their wealth. You would take your gold to the Phoenician banker, all right, the merchant. They would give you a piece of paper, all right, a document now. So you giving them real gold, but in return, they're gonna give you a piece of paper, something like this. It's just a document with some writing on it. And it's gonna have an equal value of the gold that you just deposited. And that piece of paper is gonna serve as an asset for you, meaning that you can use it to satisfy all public and private debts. You can use it to purchase goods and services. So you can do everything you need to do with it. So now both parties just got what they wanted. All right, the gold owner has secured their gold. They got the promise to pay, meaning that they're gonna use this document to do business. But whoever they give the document to, when they're ready to redeem it for gold, they can come back to the original gold storehouse, and receive the gold back. All right. So this is something that started to happen. When other merchants wanted to do business, right, as time went on, they may have needed a loan. Okay. They may have needed what's called a bank loan. We have them today, a mortgage, a car loan, etc. Right. So let's say in the ancient world, somebody wanted to get a loan. They would go to the merchant, right? But the merchant don't necessarily want to give them gold, because it's just going to create that same problem for them to store it, to carry it around, and they may get robbed or attacked. So what the banker is going to do is he's going to say this, all right, okay, you coming to me as the banker. I know you want a loan, but instead of giving you, let's say, 10 ounces of gold, I'm just going to give you a promissory note that equals the value of 10 ounces of gold, and this will serve as the loan. So the person that, the business person, they receive their loan, and me as the banker, I just have provided the promissory note, but they're going to have to pay back that money plus interest that I have applied to that promissory note. Now, what did I just do as the banker? I gave a bank loan as a promissory note, and I just created money out of thin air. I just did something that's called alchemy. All right. I just turned lead into gold. I just turned a regular sheet of paper into something valuable. All right. So think about that. I didn't really work to create the promissory note. All I did was put the green paper in, or whatever kind of paper it is I use, and boom, now I have, what I'm saying, basically gold certificates. All right. So this is what they started to do. They started to give bank loans as promissory notes. All right. The next thing I want to do now is I want you to shift your attention to this side of the screen, where you see Yahushua and the money changers. And what I want to talk about now is some of the exploitive financial practices that the descendants of the Semitic, Israelite, Phoenician bankers, Canaanite bankers, merchants, what some of their descendants started to do. Because, of course, there is the human instinct for greed and corruption. And not all merchants and business people practice this, but of course you have some that do. And usually the ones that practice it rise to the top. So when it came to acquiring more wealth, the scripture tells you about, for example, the sons of Eli in the Old Testament. It talks about the sons of Eli who served as basically priests of the temple. And it talks about how they would rob and cheat the people, how the people would give certain sacrificial meat, but they would take their forks and dig it into the pots, and whatever meat came out on the fork, they would keep for themselves, and the rest of it they would leave in the pot for sacrifice. They started to sleep with the women who were the ushers at the door of the temple. So you had these, religious leaders started to engage in different corruption. All right. Now, during the time of Jesus or Yahushua, you're going to hear me refer to him as Yahushua, but during the time of Yahushua, he noticed and caught on to some of these corrupt practices. And when you read in the New Testament about Jesus turning over the table of the money changers, this is what that is talking about. It's talking about him catching this financial exploitation. It talks about how he caught them practicing usury, which I want to say is forbidden in Exodus, maybe chapter 22 by Moses, where he tells the Israelite people to not practice usury, because this is something that has been going on for a very, very long time. This idea of, practicing usury or financial exploitation. For thousands of years, certain humans have been against this, all right, and have done their best to try to get rid of it, but it always brings itself back around. So they would practice usury. And another thing they would do is they would start to print more promissory notes than gold on hand. All right. Now, I gave you the example down here. I talked about a gold run problem. What is a gold run problem? So let's say I'm the merchant, right? And I remember, like I said, I'm only supposed to create promissory notes based on the equal value of gold that I have on reserve. So that means that if I have 10 ounces of gold in reserve, that means that there should only be 10 ounces of gold in promissory notes in circulation. All right. So that means that when those people bring back those documents, when they bring back those promissory notes to redeem the gold, it should be there. So if it's 10 ounces of gold in the reserve, that means that there should be 10 ounces of gold in promissory notes, right? But what if there's a situation where I get greedy and I start to print more promissory notes and I start to make more loans than actually I have gold available on hand? That could serve as a problem, because let's say, for example, if I have 10 ounces of gold on hand, but I have printed 30 ounces of gold in promissory notes that are out of circulation, if they all come at one time to get their gold, then I'm going to be in bankruptcy. You know what I'm saying? My bank is going to fail because I'm going to be 20 ounces of gold short. All right. So that's what's called a gold run problem. It's when everybody runs to the bank at the same time to try to pull their deposit out because they fear that, the money may be messed up, or even if they may just all come at one time. But the banking system learned very early on that this could serve as a problem. And one of the ways to fix that is they created a central banking system where they would all work together. But that's one of the things that Yahushua caught them doing. Also, unfair currency exchange rates, as we'll read about, and other various forms of financial exploitation. But ultimately, this is one of the things that led to Yahushua, or Jesus, being attacked. All right. This is what led to a lot of these Semitic Judean rabbis and merchants saying, we got to get this man out of here because he's starting to mess the money up. All right. Now let's read about that. So we have some basic information on Yahushua. All right. Jesus turned over the money changers' tables in the temple to cleanse it of corruption, driving out those buying and selling animals and exchanging currency for profit. So remember, in the temple, they were exchanging currency for profit, meaning that you had Semitic Israelites and people of different nations that may have wanted to worship as the Judeans did. They would come to the temple in Jerusalem and they would want to, make offerings, and they were doing foreign currency exchange. They would bring their currency, but they would exchange it into the Judean coin. All right. And the rabbis and the Jewish leadership were the ones responsible for this. But Yahushua caught them cheating. Okay. So it says, citing scripture, he declared God's house should be a house of prayer, not a quote den of robbers, revealing his zeal for holiness and foreshadowing his role as the ultimate sacrifice, ending the need for the old temple system of atonement. This forceful action, a key moment in Holy Week, challenged religious and economic practices that took advantage of worshipers and profaned a sacred space. Now, keep that in mind, because I want you to think about a lot of the ethnic national group today that we know is behind a lot of banking and financing. The religion that those people are forbids usury, but it's something that they do every day. Let's keep going. So, of course, this location was the temple courts in Jerusalem. All right. The time was the event occurs during the Jewish Passover, a significant religious festival. And the issue, merchants, these descendants of these Phoenician merchants, were selling animals for sacrifices, and money changers were converting foreign currency for the coins needed to buy them. This commercial activity was taking place in the temple courts, specifically the court of the Gentiles, which was meant for non-Jewish people to worship. All right. Because as I said, you had, Shemitic Judean people that was going there to worship, and also the Goyim were as well. So Yahushua, of course, when he entered the temple, he drove the merchants out that was, selling animals and the money changers. He made a whip from cords and he drove out the sheep and cattle and overturned their tables. So he started whooping people with his whip. He scattered money. So he threw all the coins that the money changers had on the floor. So as you can see, when Yahushua went in there, he basically went in there kicking behind. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of them that was in there doing business, they like, wait a minute, this dude messing the money up. You know what I'm saying? Like they were very, very, they were pissed off about it. All right. So Yahushua or Jesus, he went in there and he saw some of these, aggressive financial practices. And he wasn't with it. You know what I'm saying? And it's the same aggressive financial practices that they have today. But what did they do in the New Testament? All right. When he called them out, they basically just, they had him crucified, right? So that means that the person who tells the truth and tries to call out these money changers, historically, a lot of the times they are attacked. So the next thing that we're going to do now, all right, is we're going to bring our attention to the bottom left-hand corner, all right, of the board. And we're going to talk about, well, what is money? All right. Now, as you can see on the board, I have what is money. And let's go into this. So for me and you, money serves as an asset. All right. It's a legal tender or a financial instrument. Now, real quick, on the screen in front of you, what you have is a $5 bill. All right. Now, let's read what this $5 bill says. Now, on the top of it, it says Federal Reserve Note. Now, keep in mind that money or financial currency is also called a promissory note. All right, a promissory note or an IOU or a promise to pay. So when you hear me use that term, Federal Reserve Note, promissory note, legal tender, financial instrument, I'm talking about the same thing. I'm talking about money. All right. So on the top of it, it says Federal Reserve Note. And then in the bottom left hand corner, it says, this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. All right. So this serves as legal tender to satisfy all debts, both public and private. And it's called a Federal Reserve Note. All right. And this is what it is. So this is what the Federal Reserve prints. So the first thing is that the Federal Reserve, they print the money that we use. All right. So the Federal Reserve central banking families are the descendants, or at least they're playing the part or playing the role as the descendants of these Phoenician merchants. All right. So let's go into some of the accounting practices of the Federal Reserve. So you'll see why I say that money serves as an asset for us, but it's a liability for the Federal Reserve. Okay. So this is just some basic overview. If you were to go on the Google or the internet, you can find this on the Federal Reserve website or dealing with the United States Treasury. They don't hide it. They put it right there in front of you when you want to look up their accounting practices, because I did one day. But I said, are promissory notes liabilities recorded on the balance sheet of the United States Treasury? All right. So the balance sheet in accounting shows your assets, your liabilities, and your equity. So I was just curious, when they print money in the Federal Reserve, how do they classify it on their accounting records? Do they classify it as an asset or do they classify it as a liability? Now, in my heart of hearts, I thought it was a liability, but I just wanted to get proof. And of course, when I read it, I found out that's exactly what it is. So it says, yes, the Federal Reserve issues Federal Reserve notes, which are United States paper currency, and these notes are a significant liability on its balance sheet, representing a promise to honor the currency's value. From the public's perspective, these notes are an asset, but from the issuing central bank's viewpoint, they are a liability because the central bank is obligated to provide goods, services, or purchasing power in exchange for them. All right. A promise of value. Each Federal Reserve note serves as a promissory note, similar to an IOU from the United States government, a promise that the currency will be accepted for goods and services. The central bank's obligation. When you hold a Federal Reserve note, the Federal Reserve is obligated to stand behind its value, making it a liability to the central bank. Balance sheet perspective. For the general public, firms and banks that hold these notes, they are considered assets because they can be exchanged for value. However, for the Federal Reserve, which issues the currency, these notes are a liability because the Fed owes the purchasing power to the holders. Okay, so let's go from the top down. So as I said, money or the Federal Reserve notes serve as an asset for us or a legal tender or a financial instrument. All right. Because we can use them to purchase goods and services. And as it says on it, it satisfies all debts, both public and private. So that's what the capacity and the role that money plays for us. It plays a role as an asset. But for the actual Federal Reserve that prints it, it serves as a liability or an IOU. It serves as a promise to pay. Okay. So they're obligated to provide goods, services, and purchasing power in exchange for these promissory notes. Okay. So just keep that in mind that there are liabilities on the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve, meaning that when they print money and it's out of circulation, they know that whoever has the money, if they wanted to exchange it for gold, if they were to contact, let's say, the United States Treasury and try to redeem their United States dollars or their promissory notes for gold, that is a liability for the Federal Reserve or the Treasury until those people do that. An example of it would be this. In 1971 or 1972, I want to say, President Nixon removed the United States off of off of the gold standard. All right. During World War II, there was a conference called the Bretton Woods Conference in the late 1940s, early 1950s. All right. And the whole point of the Bretton Woods Conference was, it served a lot of, they had it for a lot of reasons because after World War II, the world was destroyed. And they needed a way to financially resurrect the world and a lot of these destroyed nations. So what was decided is that the United States dollar would be the prominent financial instrument, the world currency reserve for all nations to use to, restore power, and this allowed the United States dollar to be in a golden era. So if I can remember correctly, during the Bretton Woods Conference, they agreed upon I believe it was $35 for 1 ounce of gold. So the United States said, look, we're going to have the United States dollar as the world currency reserve. And for all nations that hold United States dollars, when you're ready to redeem your dollars, I believe it was like $35 for 1 ounce of gold. So that meant that the United States was supposed to print dollars that equaled the amount of gold that they actually had on hand. All right. And whenever these nations wanted to redeem their dollars for gold, they're supposed to be able to bring it back to the United States Treasury. The Treasury takes those dollars, they're going to shred them up and destroy them. And then they're supposed to give the gold to the people that are returning the promissory notes, right? But what started to happen is nations would send over, ships with, what I'm saying, like millions and millions of dollars or millions of US dollars, and they wanted to exchange for gold. And the United States found out pretty quick, like, wait a minute, we got a gold run problem. First of all, we have created and printed more promissory notes than we have gold on hand. And two, even if we did have the equal value, we don't want all these nations and people coming to get gold all at one time because we may go bankrupt and we may run out of all our gold. So what the United States did was they did some gangster shit. They basically just said, look, in the 1970s, we're not doing the gold reserve no more. So they took the dollar off of the gold reserve. So you can now no longer, say that the dollar was being backed by gold. You can no longer redeem your currency for gold. And what did this do? It caused the value of the money to decrease. All right. So it accelerated the devaluing of the dollar as time went on, from the 1970s all the way to now. All right. Now, remember, as I said, the people that print the money, they really are the ones in control of this. So it's not like, it's some abstract force or energy that is determining what the money is doing and what the value is going to be. Like, no, there is the central banking system. You know what I'm saying? It is the Federal Reserve merchant banking alchemical families. It is the International Monetary Fund alchemical families. It is the central banking system alchemical families. They are the ones that ultimately dictate and determine this stuff. You know what I'm saying? And that's really what's going down. So remember the dollar. So for example, like with me, like right now, I could take this $5 and I can go to the store right now. Let's say, get a jug of water, right? That serves as an asset for me. But I could also take this $5 and attempt to give it back to the Federal Reserve and redeem gold. So it serves as a liability for the Federal Reserve. So in other words, the money it plays two roles. It plays the role as an asset for us, and it plays a role as a promissory note for the Federal Reserve, right? So this is another thing that the Federal Reserve do. So they know that all these dollars are in circulation. They got all these promises to pay out there. They got all these liabilities on their balance sheet, right? So when they want to destroy money and they want to clear their balance sheet of some of these liabilities, because the United States dollars serve as the largest liability on their balance sheet, or at least one of them. So when they want to say, so let's say if they come to a conclusion that, man, we got all these liabilities on the balance sheet, all these dollars out there, but we don't want all these people trying to redeem this money. And we need to clear our balance sheets because it's looking like we, lopsided, like our liabilities outweigh our assets. So what we're going to do is we're going to destroy the money in population, and that will clear it off of the balance sheet. So for example, you ever seen people that may have had those bags of money and it's shredded up money and it's like a little gift or souvenir from the Federal Reserve or from the United States Treasury, and it'll be money that they have destroyed or money that they have shredded or money that they have taken out of circulation. That's how they destroy money, and that's how they clear money off of their balance sheet, right? But another way to do that is by destroying the wealth of the people. So they create a lot of artificial events to destroy the wealth of people, to destroy the wealth of nations. So this is why you have wars, and this is why you have inflation. This is why you have the cost of goods and services perpetually and constantly increasing. A lot of it is to destroy the wealth and to destroy the reserve, to destroy the savings of people that hold money so they can clear those liabilities off of their balance sheets. All right. This is one of their alchemical tricks that they use. You know what I'm saying? In their, practice of Babylonian magic making. All right. Because remember, it's all alchemical. They create the money out of nowhere. It's created out of thin air. Meaning you have to work hard to get it. They don't have to work hard to print it. And they can print as much of it as they want. So not only do they create war, they create these artificial events, and they also create poverty because, these central banking families, believe it or not, they work together. They intermarry with each other. All right. And they cause poverty for certain ethnic national groups. Now, right now, the term that they use is called the Global South. The Global South. For those of you all that may be into geopolitics or you may be into economics, you'll hear that term used called the Global South. And the Global South basically represent different nations and geographic regions and ethnic groups of the world, the earth, that are not part of the Anglo-American, the Anglo-British, the Anglo-Israeli empire of Western civilization and Western Europe. All right. So believe it or not, even melanated Americans in North America, so-called Black Americans, although we live in the Western Hemisphere, although we live in Western civilization, but our ethnic national group actually is classified as part of the Global South. So when you think about the monetary system known as BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and a host of other nations, this is now going to be the coalition to rival against the United States dollar and the International Monetary System, Monetary Fund, that's been created by the what word I want to use? The you know who. You know what I'm saying? We ain't even gotta say it. Y'all already know who it is. But that's what's going on right now. So to get ready to end the video, so-called Black Americans, the truth is that when we were in segregation, we were in the right place and we were going towards the right thing, because at the end of the day, we are Americans, but we never have really been fully accepted in the United States because we are our own ethnic group and our own nation of people. So that means really we're supposed to have our own monetary system. We're supposed to have our own coin and dollar that we've created. We're supposed to have our own military. And we could work hand in hand and partner with the United States. But how we have subjected ourselves to the United States, how we integrated ourselves into the United States, and how we made ourselves a party to the debt of the United States. That's why we in all this BS now. You know what I'm saying? So this is just some history, man, dealing with the monetary system. We dealt with the Phoenician merchants. We dealt with Yahushua and the money changers, and he called them out. We learned what money is, which basically is a legal tender that has been created. It's a promissory note, and it goes back to the promise to pay documents when they didn't want to carry around all that gold. So these merchants learned that we can just create documents that'll serve as legal tender, and they'll equal the same value as the gold that has been deposited, and people can use that to do business. And we have built upon that concept to where this is what we have today. So this is the modern day promise to pay, the modern day promissory note, the IOU. This is what it is. It comes in denominations of $1, $5, $10, $20, $15. Not 15, $50, $100. All right. And they serve as legal tender for us, but they're promise to pays or promissory notes or liabilities for the Federal Reserve. Okay. So keep that in mind. And if you owe somebody a whole bunch of money or gold, wouldn't you want to wipe out all your debt and be able to start over so you don't owe them anything? The answer probably is yes. So now you understand why it's always some kind of a war going on, and why we have a lot of these artificial events, and also why we have poverty. Because the truth is that these people can print as much money as they want. They print it for themselves to use all the time. Whenever they want to go to war or something like that, they finance themselves and print it. So they can pay themselves, but they can't, have some type of, let's say, health care for all the American and United States citizens, or do something to try to help, the homelessness and stuff like that. They could print money to help that too. They print it for everything else, But yeah, this is just some esoteric or hidden history dealing with, the monetary system. And it really it's not even really so much hidden. You know what I'm saying? A lot of it is right there in your face. But hopefully you acquired much knowledge from this. Y'all hit us up in the comment section. Let us know what you think. We out.